In the dark death ruins, a dense aura of death spread across the land, engulfing the area. This place was like a realm of death itself, sending chills down one's spine. Swish. However, the deathly silence in the death ruins today was completely torn apart. Countless troops surged forward, and the chaotic sounds of battle made the death ruins seem exceptionally noisy. Leading the vast forces of the great Luo Heaven Domain, Chen and his army entered the death ruins, urging their troops to the limit. They surged forward like an unstoppable spear, rushing deep into the ruins at top speed. Yet, as they advanced rapidly, they soon encountered obstacles within the death ruins. Hundreds of thousands of decaying warriors stood in their path. These warriors were clad in rotting armor, their bodies dry and shriveled, resembling skeletons. Only their sunken eye sockets still glimmered with a faint red light, and an aura of destruction emanated from their entire being. It was these decaying warriors who blocked the numerous forces entering the death ruins. Spiritual energy erupted as both sides engaged in fierce combat. These warriors, exuding a decaying aura, had clearly lost all sense of reason, like walking corpses. They felt no pain, charging recklessly into battle. Their attacks were highly coordinated, moving as one, their decaying aura blending seamlessly into their spiritual energy, creating an immensely powerful force. Many powerful forces, caught off guard, suffered devastating blows from them. These decaying warriors. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed their coordinated movements. He exchanged a serious glance with Nether. Both of them felt the same. These warriors' aura was eerily similar to that of the ancient senior they had encountered in the first ruins from the ancient heavenly palace. These warriors must have fought against the extraterritorial evil clan in their past lives and were tainted by their evil chi. That's why they've turned into this state, Nether said in a low voice. The extraterritorial evil clan. The eyes of the mountain-splitting king and the others also grew serious. Although the ancient battle was long past, they were well aware of the terrifying nature of the extraterritorial evil clan. For all the countless living beings and races in the Great Thousand World, they were the greatest enemy. Be careful, Chen reminded. His figure shot forward once again, and his vast army, receiving orders, began to move more cautiously. Waves of battle intent rippled out, and their vigilant eyes locked onto every direction. The massive army swept forward like a storm, and perhaps because of their overwhelming might, even the smaller decaying warriors didn't block their path, but instead let them pass through unhindered, heading deep into the ruins. However, this leniency did not make Chen relax. In fact, it made him even more on edge. His eyes scanned the surroundings with heightened vigilance. His caution was soon proven right. As they sped through the dark land, suddenly, from a distant dark ravine, a violent wave of battle intent erupted. In the next instant, countless black torrents surged like an ocean, filled with the scent of decay. That torrent was also a powerful battle intent. Chen's eyes narrowed. He focused on the ravine and saw thousands of withered figures rising from the air. Overwhelming battle intent spread out, but instead of excitement, this battle intent was filled with a chilling aura of death. These guys don't need King to step in. I'll handle it with my spirit sword servants, the spirit sword king said with a loud laugh, looking at the decaying army blocking the way. With a sweep of his hand, the spirit sword servants behind him roared. A tremendous battle intent swirled around them, and above them, a shadowy figure holding a massive sword began to take shape. The shadow was the embodiment of battle intent, and this battle spirit had been forged with the help of Chen through the spirit sword servant's own cultivation. Buzz, buzz. The sound of the sword's roar reverberated as the massive figure with the giant sword swung it down with fury, sending a sweeping sword light several hundred feet long, filled with intense battle intent, charging forward. The sword light was like a streak of brilliance, cutting across the sky. In an instant, it tore apart the oncoming black torrent of battle intent. Immediately after, the wielder of the sword pushed the battle intent to its peak, unleashing a wave of sword light that covered the entire battlefield, engulfing the decaying army of thousands. Boom, boom. As both sides clashed, violent battle intent surged, ripping the world apart, leaving it in tatters. However, in this fierce battle, it was clear that the spirit sword servant, with the power of the battle spirit, was even more ferocious. Amid the clash of battle intent, the decaying army of thousands began to retreat rapidly. As the soldiers of the decaying army were slain by the sword light, the decay on their bodies began to dissipate. Their already withered forms turned to ashes and scattered. Before they turned to ashes, a smile that seemed to represent liberation appeared on their dried faces. It wasn't because they still retained their consciousness, but rather because of an instinctual sense of release. As the decaying warriors turned to ashes, waves of powerful and strange energy rippled out, causing Chen and the others to brighten their eyes. This energy was exactly what they needed. Fallen origin energy. The Spirit Sword King laughed heartily, and with a wave of his sleeve, he absorbed all the vast fallen origin energy. Within just a few breaths, he had refined hundreds of fallen source pills. Such a quantity was almost equivalent to all the rewards from a third-grade ruins. This death ruins must be a first-grade ruins, Mountain-Splitting King and the others observed, feeling a bit envious. They muttered that the Spirit Sword King was quite crafty, acting so swiftly. Thankfully, the Mu King helped to refine the battle spirit. Otherwise, my Spirit Sword servant would have had to pay a price, even if we won. The Spirit Sword King cupped his hands to Chen with a polite smile. If the decaying army had faced him before the battle spirit was refined, even if he eventually won, he would have to pay some cost. But now, with the aid of the battle spirit, there was no loss. This increase in battle power was not insignificant. Chen smiled, then turned to the Mountain-Splitting King and the others, saying, "This is just the beginning. By the time it's over, you might not even want to fight, but won't have a choice." The Mountain-Splitting King and the others licked their lips in excitement, showing no fear at all. Clearly, the initial success had awakened their hunting instincts. Let's speed up. Chen's gaze swept ahead. He could feel the violent spiritual energy fluctuations erupting all around the death ruins. It was clear that various factions had noticed that the decaying warriors contained large amounts of fallen origin energy. This energy was far stronger than what they would usually find in a third-grade ruins, so everyone was accelerating their collection. Chen's eyes focused on the deepest part of the death ruins. A sense of solemnity flashed in his gaze. From what he could see, it seemed that the fallen experts in this area had been corrupted by the evil energy of the extraterritorial clan. He wasn't sure if the battle formation master they were looking for had been affected in the same way. If so, they might eventually face a battle formation master whose mind had been corrupted by evil energy. Although we didn't know how much strength such a battle formation master would retain, no matter how weak they would still be a terrifying presence. However, at this moment, retreat was not an option, as it would leave them with an unbearable sense of regret. So, no matter what dangers lay ahead, whether it be a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, Chen had to press forward. The path of the strong requires fearlessness. With this thought, Chen no longer hesitated. With a wave of his sleeve, he shot forward. Behind him, the army surged, creating a momentum that shook the heavens, drawing the attention of all surrounding forces. As they advanced deeper, the number of decaying armies they encountered grew, and their scale became even more formidable. This began to hinder Chen's progress, but fortunately, their army was powerful enough that although their speed was affected, nothing could stop them from moving forward. As Chen and his group continued to press on, the number of forces they encountered around them began to decrease. After all, in such a dangerous situation, if one didn't possess any real abilities, they would have likely been wiped out by the decaying army long ago. Yet, even so, the forces capable of advancing further are still few in number. As the army pressed deeper into the death ruins, Chen's body grew increasingly tense, an instinctive reaction to danger. Under the dark sky, Chen, advancing forward, suddenly halted. His brow furrowed as he looked ahead. There, thousands of disheveled figures were rushing toward them. These figures were drenched in blood, their spiritual energy weak and disordered. Chen waved his hand, and the army immediately came to a stop, their eyes full of vigilance. Those are the forces of the extreme martial sect. Mountain-Splitting King looked at the scattered, fleeing figures, and his expression changed slightly. He spoke in a low voice. Chen and the 9 Nether's guards' pupils also constricted. The extreme martial sect was a top-tier power from the northern domain, not weak by any means. One of their 6th-grade supremes had been leading their group before, but from the looks of it, that supreme was now gone. That 6th-grade supreme of theirs has been killed, Chen said slowly, his gaze fixed in the distance. How do you know? Mountain-Splitting King and the others were startled and asked. Mu Chen pointed ahead, and they all saw a massive dark mist rolling towards them from the depths. Within the mist, the sound of footsteps, shaking the heavens and earth, could be faintly heard. The entire world seemed to tremble slightly with the rhythm of those footsteps. As the mist slowly dispersed, countless figures in black armor, radiating a decaying aura, spread out before them. At the far end of their vision, a terrifying battle intent, like an ocean, howled above the army. The dark battle intent converged wildly, eventually coalescing into a massive black demonic wolf above the army. The wolf howled at the sky, its roar shaking the very heavens. This decaying army had a battle spirit. A battle spirit? Mountain-splitting King and the 9 Nether's guards' faces changed simultaneously, and they couldn't help but exclaim. Their expressions became extremely serious, realizing that the extreme martial sect was likely annihilated by this terrifying army. Mu Chen's eyes narrowed, and then his gaze sharply shifted upward, focusing on a shadow that flickered amidst the surging battle intent. Hiss. Mu Chen inhaled sharply, stunned as he whispered, "This army actually has a commander? Be careful, my king." As the hoarse, ancient voice echoed across the world, the 5th commander's figure disappeared entirely from this world. Mu Chen stood solemnly, gazing at the spot where the figure vanished, his hands slightly clasped in respect. The 4 spirit battle formation? Mu Chen's gaze swept toward the deeper parts of the death ruins. The area was shrouded in darkness, a kind of opaque blackness that gave off a heavy, oppressive feeling, causing a sense of unease. Mountain-splitting King, 9 Nethers, and the others also looked on, puzzled, murmuring, "The 4 spirit battle formation? Up ahead, there must be a real battle formation." Mu Chen nodded, his expression grim. Hearing the words, battle formation, the others couldn't help but show a trace of caution in their eyes. They knew very well that only a battle formation master could set up a battle formation, and once a formation was in place, its power would be earth-shattering. Ordinary spiritual array masters use the natural forces of the world to form arrays, but a battle formation master uses an endless army to form one. The overwhelming battle intent would make even the heavens tremble. Although their current forces had already gathered nearly half of the Great Luo Heaven Domain's strength, they would still need to be cautious if they encountered a battle formation set by a battle formation master. However, despite their caution, Mountain-splitting King and the others didn't show any sign of retreating. They had already come this far, and if they turned back now, their face would be completely lost. "Let's first extract the fallen source pills," Mu Chen said, pulling his gaze back. At his words, the spirits of Mountain-splitting King, 9 Nethers, and the others lifted. They finally noticed the immense fallen source energy that filled the air. It was the residue left behind after this decaying army had been purified. In the distance, other forces that had arrived upon seeing the overwhelming fallen source energy couldn't help but feel envious. But, wary of Mu Chen and his powerful forces, they could only suppress their greed. So, for now, they could only watch helplessly as Mu Chen and the others made their move. They refined the vast fallen source energy into perfectly round fallen source pills. With such a quantity, it was likely close to 10,000 pills. Such a harvest was even comparable to a second-grade ruins. Once the last trace of fallen source energy was refined into fallen source pills, Mu Chen and his team finally stopped, satisfied. They had refined over 9,000 pills in total, and with the distribution, each person would receive nearly 2,000. It was quite a substantial gain. "This death ruins is undoubtedly an actual ruin," Mountain-splitting King remarked with admiration. A mere army led by a commander was able to refine close to 10,000 fallen source pills. If this were a typical third-grade ruins, at least 30 ruins would need to be found to gather such a quantity. However, although this level of ruins contained a vast amount of treasures, the danger was also something ordinary ruins couldn't compare to. Had it not been for their powerful lineup, the outcome would likely not have been much better than the extreme martial sects. Next, the group's gaze turned to Mu Chen, looking for advice. From what the 5th commander had said before he vanished, deep within the death ruins was a terrifying battle formation. Particularly, there was the Emperor mentioned by the 5th commander, which should be the Heavenly Formation Emperor. There, perhaps countless treasures awaited, but the danger level was undoubtedly terrifying. "Let's take a look first. If it's too powerful, we'll just collect some fallen source pills and leave," Mu Chen said after a moment of silence, decisively. While the information about the battle formation master was extremely important to him, he wouldn't allow Mountain-splitting King and the others to suffer heavy losses for the sake of these treasures. Upon hearing this, Mountain-splitting King and the others agreed without hesitation, nodding in unison. "Let's go." Chen glanced at the distance. Those forces that had been watching their battle with the army were now scattering, and none seemed foolish enough to try and take advantage of the situation. Without further hesitation, Chen waved his hand, and a streak of light shot toward the depths of the death ruins. Behind him, the vast army followed closely. On the way to the deeper part of the death ruins, Chen and his team never had another moment of peace. The decaying armies, surging like a tide from the darkness, severely delayed their progress. However, Chen and the others had no other options but to break through by force. Despite their luxurious lineup, even they began to suffer some damage under such relentless opposition. Without the constant support of Mountain-Splitting King and the others, the losses would have been far greater. Though the resistance was strong, the army's pace, though slow, was drawing them closer to the heart of the death ruins. Along the way, as they neared the ruins' depths, they saw many forces that had met tragic fates. These forces were not weak. Many were first-class powers from the northern domain. Among them were even some 6th-grade supreme experts. Yet, these forces were eventually overwhelmed by the decaying army surging like a tidal wave. Some of the faster experts managed to escape, but their subordinates were decimated. The defeat of these first-class forces made Chen and his team wary. While their lineup was stronger, if they weren't cautious in such a place, total annihilation could easily become a reality. Right now, their group was almost half of the elite forces from the Great Luo Heaven Domain. If they were to fall here, it would be a severe blow to the Great Luo Heaven Domain. The tide-like army roared across the dark land, and the sound of it even caused the sky to tremble slightly. At the front of this army, Chen's sharp gaze swept across the land, spiritual energy flowing around him, ready to face any enemies. In the short span of a few hundred miles, they encountered dozens of waves of decaying armies. There was even one time when they were intercepted by an army of equal strength. That battle not only caused some losses but also left Spirit Sword King injured. The dangers in the depths of the death ruins were beyond their expectations. This should be the heart of the death ruins, Chen said, his gaze sharp as he looked toward the darkness ahead. Mountain-Splitting King and the others tensed up at once. Nine Nether's beautiful eyes scanned the surroundings and furrowed her brow, saying, "Why does it feel even quieter here? There's not a trace of the decaying armies. The tiger's domain doesn't allow other beasts to enter." He shot forward, his spiritual energy surging. The guards around him tightened their formation, and the army behind him became cautious, maintaining their formation with careful vigilance. The army silently swept past a desolate stretch of black mountains devoid of any life. Ahead of them, Chen suddenly halted. His eyes narrowed, and a flicker of shock crossed his face. Behind him, the faces of the Mountain-Splitting King and his followers also stiffened. After a brief moment, they couldn't help but inhale sharply. "What the hell?" the Mountain-Splitting King muttered in disbelief. Chen's mouth twitched slightly as he stared ahead. Beyond the mountain range lay an endless dark plain, which was now filled with the massive, decaying army. These soldiers stood motionless, like stumps of trees, seemingly lifeless. Yet, an overwhelming aura of decaying battle intent radiated from them, causing the very heavens and earth to tremble under its pressure. Before them, there were at least several 100,000 troops. Amidst the many battle flags, the sound of countless roars seemed to echo across the plain. The decaying army spread out until it vanished beyond the horizon. Facing such a formidable army, even the Mountain-Splitting King and his companions felt a deep sense of dread. The armies they had previously encountered were nothing compared to this. It was like comparing a small fry to a giant. It's too strong. With this formation, even if we charge in with all we've got, we'd be completely annihilated, the Mountain-Splitting King said with a grim expression. The army under his command numbered only around 20,000 at most. But here, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and among them, a true battle formation master existed. In such a perilous situation, not even the three emperors would dare to be careless. Chen sighed softly and nodded in agreement. His understanding of battle intent surpassed that of the Mountain-Splitting King, so he could see more clearly. The battle intent swirling across this plain was incredibly powerful, and there were strange fluctuations emanating from it. These fluctuations sent a shiver down his spine. If he was correct, hidden among this army was likely a true battle formation. If they charged in, total annihilation was inevitable. Whoosh! As Chen hesitated, a sudden sound of wind breaking reached his ears from the distant right. Looking over, they saw a massive group of soldiers charging toward them. They landed on the plain, much like Chen's army had, but when they touched down, Chen could clearly sense the shockwaves of their arrival. "It's the forces of the Divine Hall," the Mountain-Splitting King exclaimed in surprise. These guys are here too. Mu Chen nodded. Then, with a shift of his focus, he turned to another direction. As expected, the forces of Xiantian Palace had also broken through numerous obstacles and arrived at the heart of this place. In the next 10 minutes, several more large armies arrived one after another. These forces weren't top-tier powers, but their scale was incredibly impressive. Upon closer inspection, Mu Chen realized that these were the combined forces of several first-rate factions forming an imposing alliance. It became clear to him how they had managed to reach this point. However, with these powerful forces now gathered here, Mu Chen felt more optimistic than before. With them here, the seemingly impenetrable situation might just have a way out. As this thought crossed Mu Chen's mind, a flash of light erupted from the direction of the Divine Hall, followed by a soft voice that spread across the vast expanse. Could we discuss together how to break this current deadlock? When the soft voice echoed through the Black Mountain Range, the various factions present froze in place. Their eyes shifted uneasily. In a sense, all these factions were competitors, each guarding against and scheming against the others. Yet now, Zhang Tailuli from the Divine Hall was suggesting that they all join forces? Mu Chen's eyes flickered slightly, but his expression soon returned to calm. Although Zhang Tailuli seemed frail and weak, she indeed had a certain resolve. However, whether or not they could persuade these various factions, each with their own hidden agendas, to unite, depended on Zhang Tailuli's abilities. After Zhang Tailuli's words fell, whispers filled the air, but no faction showed any sign of agreement. It seemed that everyone was being extremely cautious with one another. Everyone here, I'm sure you didn't come for just the small gains we've made so far. As you can see, the real feast lies ahead. If this army is purified, we could refine tens of thousands, or even more, fallen source pills. I believe this task of gathering the fallen source pills will be easily accomplished, Zhang Tailuli said calmly, showing no surprise at their reactions, as if she had anticipated them. Her words caused many factions to breathe more heavily. Tens of thousands of fallen source pills were a vast fortune for any faction, and having such a number might even allow them to break the seal on the Earth's supreme treasure. In addition to the fallen source pills, this army contains numerous fallen ancient powerhouses. If we can acquire some of their powerful ancient divine arts, I'm sure it will be a great help to all of you. As for this army, they are indeed formidable. None of us could face them alone. But they are not invincible. According to the information I've gathered, this army is hiding the First Spirit Battle Formation. It's incredibly powerful, and even a 7th grade Supreme would be helpless against it. When Zhang Tailuli mentioned this, there was a sudden shift in tone that made the various factions freeze for a moment. Their expressions changed. How could a 7th grade Supreme not break the so-called First Spirit Battle Formation? This Zhang Tailuli seems to know quite a bit, Mu Chen thought, also surprised. It seemed Zhang Tailuli had a deeper understanding of this death ruins than they did. At least, they had just learned about the Force Spirit Battle Formation. However, while the Force Spirit Battle Formation is strong, it is not invulnerable, Zhang Tailuli continued, her soft voice carrying an unexpected confidence. Even a 7th grade Supreme couldn't break it, so how can you be so confident? One of the powerful figures couldn't help but speak up, clearly skeptical of Zhang Tailuli's words. As for how to break it, if you all agree to join forces, I will tell you. If you're not interested, I won't try to convince you, Zhang Tailuli said flatly. The factions exchanged glances. Could it be that Zhang Tailuli really knew how to break the battle formation? Mu Chen and the others exchanged looks, seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. Could Zhang Tailuli truly have a way to break the Force Spirit Battle Formation? If so, her danger level would increase significantly. If Miss Zhang Tai really has confidence, then my great Luo Heaven Domain is indeed interested, Mu Chen said after a brief pause, then smiled and spoke. He was quite interested in the death ruins, and now that they had come this far, it would be hard to leave without taking full advantage. If Zhang Tailuli had a way, they could give it a try. Of course, Mu Chen wasn't naive enough to think that Zhang Tailuli was acting out of pure generosity. At this moment, she was only trying to use the power of other factions to help break the battle formation. As for what happened after breaking the formation, there would certainly be a brutal battle to fight over the treasures of the ruins. If what Miss Shantai says is true, my Xiandian Palace is also willing to give it a try, Lu Yin said after a brief silence, his voice solemn. Their mission here was to obtain the cultivation method left by the battle formation master in this death ruins, but with just the strength of their Xiantian Palace, it was clear they couldn't do it alone. Zhang Tailuli's idea aligned perfectly with Lu Yan's own thoughts. Beside Lu Yin, Xiao Tian's gaze darkened as he looked at Mu Chen. Bloodshot veins crept into his eyes, giving him a menacing appearance. However, Mu Chen simply ignored the intense glare and chose not to react. The situation in the arena shifted dramatically. With the endorsement of two top factions, a ripple of excitement stirred among the other factions. Those who had already joined the alliance hesitated but were clearly intrigued. They weren't fools and understood Zhang Tai Lu Li's move likely had some hidden agenda, but they also had their own intelligence. Moreover, even if they couldn't seize the treasure, at least they could ransack a batch of fallen source pills. If the situation took a turn for the worse, they could quickly retreat. Various forces flashed through their thoughts, and after a moment of hesitation, they reached a decision and no longer wavered. Since the Divine Hall has such confidence, our Azure Cloud sect is also willing to lend a hand. Our Diamond Gate will follow suit. Heavenly Steel Mountain is willing to join forces. The voices of agreement rose one after another, each representing a major faction. Though their individual strength might not rival the top forces, when they gathered together, their combined power and momentum were enough to make even the top factions take notice. Mu Chen, watching from the sidelines, glanced at Nine Nether and simply smiled faintly. With these first-rate forces joining together, it seemed possible to break the current deadlock. However, Mu Chen couldn't help but feel curious about how the situation would be broken. Due to his sensitivity to battle intent, he could faintly sense the terrifying fluctuations emanating from the Dark Plane army. In such an aura, even a 6th-grade Supreme would have no chance of fighting back. As Mu Chen pondered, several lights streaked across the sky from the direction of the Divine Hall, landing atop a mountain peak. The leader among them was none other than Zhang Tai Lu Li. She was still seated in a wheelchair, her white dress making her appear frail and delicate. Yet, her slightly pursed red lips revealed a hint of determination. Behind her stood Fong Yi, acting as her bodyguard, his cold gaze occasionally sweeping toward Mu Chen's direction. The leaders of the armies, I hope you can join us to discuss a solution to break the deadlock, Zhang Tai Lu Li said with a soft smile, her eyes looking at the various forces. Mu Chen exchanged a glance with the mountain-splitting king and nodded. He and Nine Nether then flew over and appeared atop the mountain. After clasping his hands in salute, Mu Chen smiled and said, Mu Chen from the Great Luo Heaven Domain, it's an honor to meet Miss Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai Lu Li's gaze shifted to Mu Chen, her surprise evident at the young and handsome face before her. His demeanor was calm and gentle, a stark contrast to the sharp edge he had shown during his confrontation with Xiao Tian. You honor me, Mu King, Zhang Tai Lu Li nodded gracefully. Whoosh. At this moment, Lu Yin and Xiao Tian also arrived. However, their eyes were filled with coldness as they stared at Mu Chen. It seemed that if the situation were different, they would already have made a move to confront him. Whoosh. Whoosh. Leaders of the other first-rate forces arrived one after another, gathering atop the mountain. In an instant, the peak was filled with powerful figures, their lineup impressive. Miss Zhang Tai, how should we break this military formation? Can we discuss it now? Lu Yin said with a clasped fist, his voice deep. All eyes turned to Zhang Tai Lu Li. Though she appeared delicate, under the gaze of so many powerful individuals, she showed no sign of fear. She spoke softly. According to the information I have, this army is known as the Four Spirits Army from ancient times, and its commander is called the Heavenly Formation Emperor, a true battle formation master. At the height of its power, the Four Spirits Army consisted of 1 million soldiers. However, its strength has waned, and its current scale is less than half of what it once was. Even so, it remains a formidable enemy. The other's expressions grew serious. The aura of 1 million soldiers was intimidating. After all, these weren't just 1 million rabble, but elite warriors who had cultivated their battle intent over many years. When gathered together, their power was such that few could stand against them, even below the Earth Supreme level. However, there is no need to fear too much. While the Four Spirits Army is strong, it has decayed. Right now, they are no more than walking corpses, their power not even half of what it once was. Zhang Tai Lu Li smiled slightly, saying, the Four Spirits Army is divided into 2 parts, the inner army and the outer army. The outer army is vast in number, making it difficult to penetrate, while the inner army is protected by the First Spirit's battle formation, which is incredibly powerful. This formation cannot be broken through force alone. The battle formation is divided into 4 parts, and only by breaking all 4 can the formation be completely shattered. If even one part is broken, the other 3 parts will quickly repair it. The most important thing is that the Four Spirits battle formation should not be recklessly attacked. as it will only grow stronger in the face of power. Therefore, we must have 4 commanders lead their respective armies into battle, using the strength of their armies to break the formation. Zhang Tailuli looked at the group and said, "Thus, you, the leaders of the outer army, must work together to deal with the outer army." When Mu Chen and the others heard Zhang Tailuli's words, they paused for a moment and then furrowed their brows slightly. This was because, at this point, including Zhang Tailuli and Xiao Tian, they only had 3 battle-will geniuses in total. Were they now being asked to find another battle-will genius? This was no easy task, after all. Even in the entire northern domain, the number of people who could be called battle-will geniuses was only a handful. Finding one now seemed nearly impossible. Seeing the frown on everyone's face, Zhang Tailuli smiled and said, "I know that gathering 4 battle-will geniuses is quite troublesome, so I have a compromise. The one who enters the 4th formation can be led by 3 commanders, each with high battle-will achievements, who will lead the army together." Wouldn't that make it hard to break the formation? A person with notable insight spoke up thoughtfully. Everyone present knew very well that even if 3 commanders with high battle-will achievements were involved, they would still struggle to match a single battle-will genius, as their understanding and control of battle-will were not on the same level. Moreover, these 3 commanders couldn't unify their will, so relying on their individual battle-will to resist the first spirit battle formation would likely not be a simple task. As Ms. Zhang Tailuli mentioned earlier, if the 4th formation cannot be broken, even if we break the other 3 formations, it will likely be futile, correct? Mu Chen also asked. If the 4-spirit battle formation were in its perfect state, then yes, that would be the case, Zhang Tailuli softly replied. He and 9 Nether then flew over and appeared atop the mountain. After clasping his hands in salute, Mu Chen smiled and said, "Mu Chen from the great Luo Heaven Domain. It's an honor to meet Miss Zhang Tai." Zhang Tailuli's gaze shifted to Mu Chen, her surprise evident at the young and handsome face before her. His demeanor was calm and gentle, a stark contrast to the sharp edge he had shown during his confrontation with Xiao Tian. "You honor me, Mu King." Zhang Tailuli nodded gracefully. Whoosh. At this moment, Lu Yin and Xiao Tian also arrived. However, their eyes were filled with coldness as they stared at Mu Chen. It seemed that if the situation were different, they would already have made a move to confront him. Whoosh. Whoosh. Leaders of the other first-rate forces arrived one after another, gathering atop the mountain. In an instant, the peak was filled with powerful figures, their lineup impressive. "Miss Zhang Tai, how should we break this military formation? Can we discuss it now?" Lu Yin said with a clasped fist, his voice deep. All eyes turned to Zhang Tailuli. Though she appeared delicate, under the gaze of so many powerful individuals, she showed no sign of fear. She spoke softly. "According to the information I have, this army is known as the 4 Spirits Army from ancient times, and its commander is called the Heavenly Formation Emperor, a true battle formation master. At the height of its power, the 4 Spirits Army consisted of 1,000,000 soldiers. However, its strength has waned, and its current scale is less than half of what it once was. Even so, it remains a formidable enemy." The others' expressions grew serious. The aura of 1,000,000 soldiers was intimidating. After all, these weren't just 1,000,000 rabble, but elite warriors who had cultivated their battle intent over many years. When gathered together, their power was such that few could stand against them, even below the Earth's supreme level. However, there is no need to fear too much. While the 4 Spirits Army is strong, it has decayed. Right now, they are no more than walking corpses, their power not even half of what it once was. Zhang Tailuli smiled slightly, saying, "The 4 Spirits Army is divided into 2 parts, the inner army and the outer army. The outer army is vast in number, making it difficult to penetrate, while the inner army is protected by the 4 Spirits battle formation, which is incredibly powerful. This formation cannot be broken through force alone. The battle formation is divided into 4 parts, and only by breaking all 4 can the formation be completely shattered. If even one part is broken, the other 3 parts will quickly repair it. The most important thing is that the 4 Spirits battle formation should not be recklessly attacked, as it will only grow stronger in the face of power. Therefore, we must have 4 commanders lead their respective armies into battle, using the strength of their armies to break the formation." Zhang Tailuli looked at the group and said, "Thus, you, the leaders of the outer army, must work together to deal with the outer army. When Mu Chen and the others heard Zhang Tai Lu Li's words, they paused for a moment, and then furrowed their brows slightly. This was because, at this point, including Zhang Tai Lu Li and Xiao Tian, they only had 3 battle-will geniuses in total. Were they now being asked to find another battle-will genius? This was no easy task. After all, even in the entire northern domain, the number of people who could be called battle-will geniuses was only a handful. Finding one now seemed nearly impossible. Seeing the frown on everyone's face, Zhang Tai Lu Li smiled and said, "I know that gathering 4 battle-will geniuses is quite troublesome, so I have a compromise. The one who enters the 4th formation can be led by 3 commanders, each with high battle-will achievements, who will lead the army together." Wouldn't that make it hard to break the formation? A person with notable insight spoke up thoughtfully. Everyone present knew very well that even if 3 commanders with high battle-will achievements were involved, they would still struggle to match a single battle-will genius, as their understanding and control of battle-will were not on the same level. Moreover, these 3 commanders couldn't unify their will, so relying on their individual battle will to resist the for-spirit battle formation would likely not be a simple task. As Ms. Zhang Tai Lu Li mentioned earlier, if the 4th formation cannot be broken, even if we break the other 3 formations, it will likely be futile, correct? Mu Chen also asked, if the for-spirit battle formation were in its perfect state, then yes, that would be the case, Zhang Tai Lu Li softly replied. Waves of mighty battle intent surged into the heavens. Here, 3 top-tier forces stood alongside a dozen first-rate forces. Together, their combined armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands, making for a truly majestic and awe-inspiring sight. Are you all ready? Zhang Tai Lu Li's gentle voice once again rang out, drowning the chaotic sounds around them and drawing countless gazes. The forces all cupped their fists toward the mountain peak where Zhang Tai Lu Li stood, signaling their readiness. Since all is ready, let us begin. The outer army of the 4 Spirits army may not be as elite as the inner army, but their numbers are vast. Fortunately, they have now decayed, and their battle intent is less than half of what it once was. As long as you follow my command, I can guarantee that your losses will be minimized. Zhang Tai Lu Li's calm voice was filled with confidence. The various forces hesitated for a moment, but nodded in agreement. If Zhang Tai Lu Li could truly help them minimize their losses while fighting this decaying army, they would proceed. If it turned out she simply intended to use them as cannon fodder, they could always retreat and break the alliance. Zhang Tai Lu Li likely wouldn't dare to play such a dangerous game. Mu Chen and the mountain-splitting king exchanged a glance and nodded lightly. Everyone, let us begin. The Divine Hall will serve as the spearhead, while the rest of the armies will protect the flanks. Zhang Tai Lu Li's voice, though calm, held a fervor that surfaced in her otherwise composed eyes. She raised her slender white hand and swung it down with force. Boom! The Divine Hall's vast forces were the first to charge into the sky, their mighty battle intent spreading like an ocean, causing the very skies to shift. Whoosh! Whoosh! The massive army surged forward like a black cloud, and behind them, the forces of all sides followed in an orderly fashion, tightly trailing behind the Divine Hall's army. This immense allied force, with its astonishing momentum, made the very earth shake as it passed. Although their battle intents were distinct and separate, without blending, the sheer number of troops gathered together was terrifying. Mu Chen, leading the army of the great Luo Heaven Domain, was positioned in the middle to rear of this colossal alliance. As he watched the grand force, his heart stirred in amazement. The black clouds formed by the army blotted out the sky and roared across the horizon, and mere minutes later, they charged into the dark plain. There, the decaying army with no visible end came into view. The rows of battle flags and the decaying battle intent that filled the sky made the forces on all sides grow tense. However, Zhang Tai Lu Li, among the army, showed no fear at all. The intense fervor in her beautiful eyes only grew more apparent. Her clear voice rang out in every ear. Charge! The massive allied forces, with the army of the Divine Hall at its vanguard, in this moment, resembled an unmatched sharp dagger, ruthlessly charging directly into the defensive line of the decaying army. Two terrifying torrents collided with an earth-shattering impact at this very moment. The overwhelming battle will surged into the sky, shaking the very fabric of space itself. As the battle will surged, the earth cracked open. The first layer of the decaying army's defenses was instantly torn apart, and then the enormous allied forces, like a tidal wave, surged through the gap, charging in at lightning speed. Countless decaying warriors were reduced to ashes in an instant, vanishing without a trace. However, the massive allied forces did not pause for a moment. Instead, they tore through with even fiercer momentum, sweeping deep into the heart of the decaying army. Within the ranks of the allied forces, Chen couldn't help but take a deep breath at the terrifying clash of battle will. Such a spectacle was truly overwhelming. He looked towards the distant, slender white figure, and a solemn expression appeared on his face. This woman,